legislature to do anything. I think it's, yeah, and it is our committee. It's dated today and shows 8 waiting.
Okay. Anything now? You should be seeing something.
Let me reload it and see if it goes. Yep, we got her.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's a little odd. It is delayed compared to what we're actually doing, but that's fine. It's working.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure thing. Thanks for being patient.
All right, committee. We are now streaming live as we should be, and I'm happy for that. We've had the overview of House Bill 2026 provided by the reviser, and would like now to open for proponent testimony, and we'll call upon Scott Schultz. And Scott, just as a suggestion, since we have several new members to the committee, perhaps a bit of detail on what Senate Bill 123 does in the real world in terms of services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to do that. And I'd like to maybe even touch on diversion too, since that may not be a term that is normally understood. This whole bill is Scott Schultz, Executive Director with the Sentencing Commission. We are in support of this particular bill. It is the Criminal Justice Reform Commission joins in this recommendation to support and pass this bill, as they did with their final report to the legislature. The bill that was actually introduced last year is, as Natalie indicated, very similar with regard to just a couple items. And that was kind of a coming together of prosecutors as well as the Sentencing Commission. Representative Owens was very pivotal in bringing all of the parties together, probation, as well as all the parties involved that are affected by this particular bill. And it has received broad consensus from all of those groups. Hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn if they've changed their mind, but as it was last year anyway, it received broad consensus. To the tune of it passed out of this committee, and as most of Representative Owens' bills do, it passed out of the House 125 to nothing. So it is one of those things that obviously has enjoyed great support. What is diversion? For those of you that are unfamiliar with that term, diversion allows prosecutors to, as it means, divert individuals from the system. And that actually allows them to set up different criteria that if they qualify for that criteria, the prosecutors can make an agreement with them to, as long as they're not violating new laws and there are terms and conditions of that diversion agreement. They sign an affidavit indicating facts that are of the case. And so if they violate that, then that affidavit is simply introduced in court, and it's basically a done deal by then. So the benefit that you're receiving from diversion, if I commit an offense and I am eligible for diversion, I usually don't have very much criminal history. And my advantage, of course, is I can keep that from becoming a conviction if I do what the agreement says with the prosecutor. Now, these diversion agreements are of all shapes, sizes, and colors. Prosecutors from all over the state can make their own diversion plans as far as they want to. And so there isn't a set diversion. So if I went to Barton County versus Finney County, those diversion programs are going to be different than each other. This bill allows, though, for state-paid substance abuse treatment for individuals that are subject to possession of felony controlled substances. So a third-time marijuana conviction, for example, possession of meth, possession of cocaine, possession of prescription medication that they're not supposed to have. Those type of things that are going to potentially make them eligible Some programs, some prosecutors don't have those types of programs right now. Some do. And some actually, like Wyandotte County, have a fairly robust program that they've developed for possession offenders. What does that do? As I've indicated in my testimony, there are a lot of advantages for everybody in the process as far as diversion is concerned. For people that that need substance abuse treatment, this allows them to, from the time of arrest to treatment, that's a shorter period of time with a diversion agreement. This bill incentivizes prosecutors to give diversion to those folks because now they know they have state paid treatment, and they make agreements with probation officers to supervise. That hasn't happened before. And so some prosecutors' offices are, as you might expect, very small, and they don't have the robust victim witness and diversion coordinators that a lot of the other folks, other larger jurisdictions do. This would allow for probation then to be able to supervise those folks through the substance abuse treatment process, and again, the state would be actually paying for it. So again, it is not required. That prosecutors wouldn't have to do this, but it allows them now to be able to receive funding from and pay the treatment providers. This is done through, the bill talks about, not directly, but the Senate Bill 123 program has been administered by the Sentencing Commission since 2003. And currently, it's a program that's a $9 million program that we have about 150 or 140 treatment providers that are certified by the Department of Corrections. And then the Sentencing Commission acts as the bank to pay those treatment providers to provide up to 18 months of services to those offenders by paying the invoices of the treatment providers. And so if you are convicted right now of a possession offense and you fall into that criteria where you don't have a huge amount of criminal history, the court still can, but you actually get mandatory treatment if you have lesser criminal history, that you would actually get that paid treatment. So what we're doing is we're actually utilizing the same infrastructure that the Senate Bill 123 program in a diversion context. And we can run, the commission is happy to receive those requests for funding this particular diversion program. What I would tell you again, it also encourages the offenders to stay on diversion, makes them more accountable because now they're being supervised. It also allows for those communities that are already expending funds for substance abuse, they can now use that on other offenders because the state is paying for these particular offenders that might otherwise have gone through the process and had to be subject to substance abuse treatment. Again, from a court perspective, the hope here is that it's going to provide for more efficiency for the court because you're not going to have those offenders coming through the system. So we were reserving more time for more serious offenders. And finally, again, this enjoys support from probation. Again, when Vice Chair pulled together all the parties that were applicable and relevant, this was something that was worked out to a point where everybody was on board. Now, there is a fiscal note, certainly. This is going to cost a little bit of money. The commission, our office has estimated that this would be somewhere around 25 to 75 folks in the first year of implementation, which would equate somewhere between $88,000 to $265,000. I think that probably in looking over this the last several months that we've been dealing with this, I'm guessing that probably it's going to be on the higher end. If you look in the Sentencing Commission's impact We have Wyandotte County, for example. At the time that we had, since there aren't any available, we physically had to call prosecutors' offices to determine how many folks they had on diversion for possession. And so there isn't just a database that you can see. So we actually had to physically call, and at the time that we did that, you can kind of see the examples. Douglas County had 11 felony drug diversions. Sedgwick County had 11 as well. Shawnee County 46, Johnson County 34, and then Wyandotte County had 85. And so if depending on the criteria that would be set, and in here the language has that the commission would set the criteria just like they do in Senate Bill 123 with those that would be available for treatment. I think that probably 75 would probably be fairly conservative based upon the folks that are already here. We heard from Wyandotte County during this process of looking at this, and they indicated that 90% of the folks that they have on diversion right now for possession offenses wouldn't be eligible for the current 123. So what we'd be looking at would be making that criteria much more easier for a diversion context, because you've got offenders that are going to have lesser criminal histories. So and with that, hopefully fewer problems, fewer issues that are going to cause them to be more susceptible to be successful on diversion. And that's the whole point of this exercise, is to provide them the tools to be successful on diversion so that they can get off of diversion and don't have to go through the system. Everybody's happy. They don't have a felony conviction. The prosecutor's happy because they don't have to proceed with the case and continue to pour more of the felony possessions into the system. So with that, again, the infrastructure obviously is already in place, and we just run that through the Sentencing Commission at the behest of those prosecutors that are willing in those jurisdictions to take advantage of this program. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Very well. Looks like Representative Wheeler, you have your hand up whether you know it or not. Do you have a question for Mr. Schultz?
I'm holding my chin up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, your electronic hand is up, so if you want to take that down, if you just click on your name and it can go away. Representative Owens.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Scott, did you happen, when you asked the folks in Sedgwick County, Johnson County, whether the passage of this legislation would increase the amount of people that they would send to diversion, since it actually creates a program? So my question is, do you anticipate an increase in the number of drug diversions taking advantage of this program over those that are current, you know what I mean, that the 11 or 12 or whatever they're currently on?
Representative Owens, yes, I think that well, in answer to your first question, no, we did not at that particular time, but I believe that yes, it will be once it's out there and utilized. You know, keep in mind there are some jurisdictions, and you know, this has been probably a couple of years ago, and that could have changed with different administrations. But there's some prosecutors out there that don't even divert traffic tickets. And so, you know, this is a discretionary program that would allow for an opportunity for them to now have that paid for, which maybe make it easier for them to be willing to divert felony possession charges. Sedgwick County, I know that Mark Bennett is very supportive of this, and that'd be something that I would see that Sedgwick County certainly would be probably instead of having 11 they would be looking at maybe being more willing to increase their numbers.
Excellent.
I'm sorry. I would say for right now, as I said, I think we're probably on the conservative end as far as 75 is concerned. My proposal, of course, would be that if things start getting out of whack for the next year, I think our office can handle, from a fiscal standpoint, handle that the implementation up to this point, starting on July 1. But, we'll just have to see going forward whether or not we need to come back in and make a request from a budget standpoint for extra funds.
Well, thank you, Scott. Hopefully, my anticipation would be that you're correct, and my hope is that you're correct, because it's a lot cheaper to treat them than it is to send them to prison, and in that cycle for those that the treatment will be beneficial. So, thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Day.
Sorry, I was using the wrong mouse. I've got two computers going here at the same time. And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to ask this. This is Representative Jennifer Day from District 48. But just looking through the different testimonies and information that was given, I have concerns wondering about the funding for this, just making sure that we've got the funding, but also there's a point that's made by the KDOC in their testimony about the probation officials in the state already having high caseloads. So I was wondering how we would deal with that going forward. Thank you so much.
Representative, that's a great question. And I think some of the things that we've thought about too here is that you have folks that have been arrested for possession offenses. Now, if they don't get diversion, they're going to go ahead and process through the system. And on the back end, if they're eligible, they would be eligible for Senate Bill 123 anyway. So those same probation personnel, at least from a community corrections standpoint, those same personnel would actually be supervising those folks anyway. They may have a different take on it, but it would seem logical that either you're going to be supervising them on the front end if you make that agreement with the county or district attorney, or if they're eligible, you're going to be supervising them on the back end too. So I think that is a concern. What you're going to see a lot is that last week I think when I talked about that push and pull within the system, that yes, we're giving more opportunity now on the diversion side, but probation has actually come forward and said, if we can make agreements with you to supervise, we're willing to do that. So I think that there may be some extra caseload, but I think some of those, especially on the community corrections side, they would have been probably supervising those folks anyway.
Representative Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be an odd question, but it has to do with the fiscal side of it. Do we know what the percentage of those who are insured, whether it's private or state, and if this would be a program that the insurance would cover? Because I know just like a regular rehab program is upward of $12,000, and insurance generally covers the bulk of that.
We do have some folks, and even in the Senate Bill 123 program, there are folks with private insurance, and they actually do utilize that. So it is a possibility. What you're going to see, though, is in the criminal justice system, about 85% of the felons that are sentenced are represented by Board of Indigent Defense or public defenders. And so what that tells us is they have to be indigent to do that. The likelihood, of course, is as you can, the logical progression would be that they probably aren't able to afford insurance or they don't have insurance in their jobs to be able to provide for mental health treatment, substance abuse, those type of things. And so the likelihood of them being able to, there are some definitely, and we do have private pay in some of those situations, so that it actually probably could cover that particular situation. So we would have some of those, and that would actually save, private pay normally saves us money because then we're usually the payer of last resort. So if they do have insurance, it would cover it. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, that did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Scott, for showing up today and presenting this to us. I think we all kind of agree that this is the right thing to do, and I think our only concern is the cost of it. Is there a way that you can evaluate the cost savings of having the people go through this program versus going through the system itself and the cost of that? Seems like there'd be a lot of money saved, and we ought to be able to pay for this with just the savings alone.
Representative French, I certainly appreciate that question. And what I can tell you, I can't tell you what the cost of an individual going through the entire system would be. Certainly the cost of them being non-compliant and going to prison is going to be greater than that of paid treatment while they're on diversion. Those costs are, I can give you the average cost that we've, for example, from last year of $3,534 on an annual basis that we spent per offender. $3,500 isn't too much in the grand scheme of things. And for them to actually get that, being in the community, receiving treatment in the community is always cheaper than in an incarcerated setting. And so while I can't give you the entire, what it would cost to move through the system, you can think about how much time is going to be involved with not just having the prosecutor, maybe the defense attorney and the offender entering into the diversion agreement, and then services being provided, to having to show up at multiple hearings with judge, all the parties involved, prosecutor, defense attorney, multiple times, having a hearing, possibly impaneling a jury, all of those things that obviously cost time and resources. So I think, this is something that while we can't quantify it, we can, just not in a dollar amount.
Thank you, Scott. Scott, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions for Mr. Schultz? I don't see any. And Scott, did you want to say something else? You look like you were ready to speak.
Mr. Chair, I think that Representative Wheeler's virtual hand, he was wanting to high five me. Having worked for him before, I think he was just wanting to high five. So, but thank you so much, and we ask for your support.
I'm quite sure that's what it was.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, that's what it was. He was one of my prized employees.
Yes, I remember. Okay, so we're going to move on to Ed Klump with the Association Chiefs of Police, Kansas Peace Officers, Kansas Sheriffs. Ed, welcome back.
Mr. Chairman, I intended for mine to be written only, and it can stand that way, but I'll be glad to answer any questions if people have any.
We're happy to accept your written testimony, and we'll commit that to the committee for their consideration. And we'll move on then to John Jenks with the Greater Kansas City Chamber. John, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Well, thank you for allowing me to testify in favor of HB 2026 today. The KC Chamber and our 2,000 members, which 40% of them are on the Kansas side, is a supporter of expanding drug treatment programs in the state of Kansas to improve outcomes for people stuck in that endless cycle of addiction. Most of us have a family member or a friend or a close acquaintance that has been caught up in the vicious trap of addiction and has seen the damaging effects that drugs and substance abuse can have on a person's life, and really for those around them too. So it's pretty unique for a chamber to care about these issues of drug treatment and criminal justice, but the KC Chamber has taken a special interest in this and really looks at it through an economic and jobs lens. This is why, for some of you, you may recall that a couple of years ago, we started our Workforce Opportunities for Returning Citizens, or WORK initiative. And the aim of this initiative is to get justice-involved individuals and returning citizens hired by employers. We've started with our members, but really employers in the Kansas City area. Despite some setbacks from COVID that we experienced, I'm proud to report that we have begun getting folks hired, and we're starting to see the fruits of our labor coming through. But getting back to the legislation and looking ahead at this legislation, expanding drug treatment programs for Kansas on diversion is a great step the legislature can take. to show that it is serious in addressing the drug epidemic gripping Kansas and really our country right now, while keeping our communities safe. And unfortunately, you know, we've heard the anecdotal stories that and heard from experts that this drug crisis has really gotten worse during the coronavirus pandemic. This bill is a jobs opportunity as well. As you all know, a person who is justice involved has a much better likelihood of success if that person is seeking and receiving proper treatment and rehabilitation, and is surrounded by family and other support groups while able to maintain stable employment. This bill offers both of those things. And as I mentioned, this bill is an opportunity to keep folks participating in the workforce, which is going to be key as the economy recovers from the economic shutdowns that we experienced last year due to the coronavirus. And as we see baby boomers continuing to leave the workforce for retirement. The Chamber applauds the efforts of the Criminal Justice Reform Commission and this committee, and looks forward to working with this committee down the road on improving outcomes for folks in our criminal justice system. Again, the Chamber thanks you, for allowing me to testify today, and we strongly support HB 2026, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Committee, any questions for John? I don't see anything. I feel, however, compelled to just comment that the Greater Kansas City Chamber is, I think, serving as a really good example of what the business community can do to foster an environment that assists and supports those who've run afoul with the law to get about to having a lawful life and an opportunity at a better life. And we'll give you an opportunity at some time during this session to maybe attend a committee, maybe even in person, who knows, to visit just a little bit about some of the initiatives that you've undertaken that I'm familiar with. And you're to be commended with that and serve as a great example for chambers across Kansas, and at least 40% of Kansas in your area, and maybe more ought to get on board. I believe that is the end of our proponent testimony. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of Bill 2026? I don't see anybody else. We'll move on to neutral testimony. I commit to the committee two written neutral parties, Kansas Department of Corrections via testimony of Randy Bowman, and the ACLU via written submission of testimony by Nadine Johnson. And would like to call upon Dr. Stuart Little, representing the Behavioral Health Association of Kansas. Dr. Little, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Yes. Thank you. Hi, my name's Stuart Little, and just briefly, since this is the first time I'll appear in front of you all, I have a government relations advocacy working with a group of substance use disorder treatment providers, the largest network of SUD providers around the state who do lots of the Senate Bill 123 work. I also represent the Kansas Community Corrections Association, so I'm for folks that are doing community-based adult and juvenile services or watching those issues as well, so I may appear in front of you all on a variety of issues. I appreciate the opportunity to appear virtually and just make a couple of comments. Normally, we are the kind of people who love community-based treatment. We would be supportive of House Bill 2026, but part of what I have done, I think this is maybe the fourth year in a row, is on a bill that expands the ability to access Senate Bill 123 resources. If you don't add the money, we will diminish the significance and the capacity of the bill to fund, to do the work. The bill is a good bill. I think we've talked about expanding to diversion. It does add more participants to the program, and coming out of that pool, there's a fiscal note, as Mr. Schultz described, somewhere between 80 and 250,000 a year plus. It's probably on the low end, I think, as people and attorneys begin to see this as a diversionary, as a tactical move, that those numbers will go up. The more that we add people to the pool and access those resources, the more folks will have to wait for treatment, the more treatment may get modified, and that has an impact. We went through the process 2 years ago of adding new offenders. I believe the last group added in, I think 2 years ago, was about 500 plus offenders. And I must note that, give the legislature credit, additional funding was added through the budgetary process of about $2 million. There was also additional funding to add up some of the reductions that had been made. And so we have just now in the last 2 years, and that money has stayed in for the last 2 years. We have just now kind of reached that operational capacity, added those new folks in. And what we need to make sure going forward is that the policy choices that are made here are carried over into the budgetary process. I've already engaged Chair Representative Francis on the House Transportation Public Safety Budget Committee, that this is an issue when the Sentencing Commission budget comes up. I'll make these same comments to that committee and note that if this bill is passed, I want to make sure this is high on your list to consider during the appropriations process at omnibus, that by the time this gets to that point, we certainly, the financial cost is not huge, but it is hugely important to making sure that folks get access to services. So this is a symbol. I get to a couple of the questions. I think Representative, one of the questions came up at Potter about, I believe, private insurance. I think the one thing I would note is that some of these folks may have, you've got the capacity to get into a diversionary process, you may have a bit more access to private insurance, and private insurance is the first payer in this process. That's who they go to get a payment from first. It's not going to be huge, but it could be helpful. So we're supportive of the bill, but we're just neutral because this needs something that needs to be funded. And the last time you added folks to the pool, there was funding increased as well. And we're having those conversations. And I note that both Representative Owens sits on the Appropriations Committee and Representative Resman is Vice Chair of the Public Safety Budget Committee. So he'll hear me say this a couple more times probably. I'd be happy to stand for questions. Oh, I would, Mr. Chairman, I would note one other thing. I just have to say, as someone who works for people in the addictions field, to have Mr. Jenks here from one of the local chambers is exactly part of how the conversation needs to take place going forward. And I wanted to thank him for that. It is great work being done by local chambers because particularly in COVID, the need and issues with employment are massive for SUD work. Sorry, I'll pause.
Good for you. Representative Carmichael. It's always good to see your lips moving and not hear anything, but you probably should.
Well, it's your lucky day because I've had technological failures all day long with my computer. I'm literally on the last browser opportunity to get into your committee. So I'm so pleased to be with you. Mr. Little, I've listened to similar testimony from you, I think for the past year or two at least, and I continue to be perplexed because I understand all of us need appropriations to accomplish the policy goals and missions that we get assigned by the legislature. But I've been reluctant to vote for this particular bill in the past because of your words saying we don't have enough money to run and meet the responsibilities that we have now. And I sometimes interpret that as in saying, so please don't give us more. So my question to you, Stuart, is should I vote for this or not?
If you're taking the testimony as written, we are neutral on the bill because we believe it needs to be funded. We are, past experience has suggested that the appropriations process is paying attention to that, evaluates that, and to the extent that there are resources, the appropriation process can be and should be supportive of this. So, I'm not here to tell you how to vote on a bill, but this is a program that works. This is a good addition to it. We've been talking about diversion for a long time, and as long as the money comes, it's not going to bring the system to its knees. As Mr. Schultz has described, this is not a huge number of offenders now at this point, but it's the kind of thing that on principle, if we're asserting if you're going to add more people, you really need to be adding the funding to provide the services. That may
Well,
not
I'm
be,
not.
but that's my answer.
Yeah, well, you're a good wordsmith, my friend. I don't know exactly what your clients want me to do here. I guess I'll just stumble through. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Committee, other questions? Stuart, you've been around this process for a real long time. Are there very many occasions that you have seen the appropriation be made and have the policy follow, or does it typically occur that policy is adopted and the funding follows?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if the nature of the beast is you have to present the necessity of generating revenue to convince the folks on the Appropriations Committee who do not have the time and attention and usually are not participating into the policy side that's why they get to the end of the session, go over the budget, the bills that have passed and adjust the budget accordingly. That's why we have an omnibus process, and I trust the process most of the time.
Yeah, so in essence, if this committee were to make a policy decision to send this on to the House, and the House ultimately passed it as it has in the past with 125 votes, that's a fairly strong articulation of a policy. And with some encouragement, the budget committees certainly could not avoid understanding that some level of need would be there to be successful in executing the policy decision.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And I think in particular, since these topics come from the Criminal Justice Reform Commission and the Sentencing Commission, there's a very broad range of support for this.
Thank you. Representative French.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Little, for being here today. I think we just need to say up front that this is going to be an unusual budget year. I know me personally, I'm going to be looking at all new funding as too much. We can't afford it. So it's really going to take a lot of justification for any new funding as far as I'm concerned. Regardless of the goodness of what you want to do, it's going to be a tough year. And I'm just telling you right now, it's going to be very hard for us to add any new funding. We just need to maintain the good funding we already have going on. So I think as we go on with the process, we're going to have to be very, very careful about agreeing to new funding, regardless of how worthy it is of that funding. So I'm not saying that we wouldn't fund this, but there's going to be a lot of good ideas on the table, and we cannot afford them all. So just want to put that as a point of reference for future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Scott, if I might just pivot to you for a moment. In terms of the Sentencing Commission, you articulate certain regulations in operating the Senate Bill 123 program. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And in the event this policy decision was made and passed, and in the event the legislature failed to adequately fund the expanded program, would you have the ability to make a determination, or the Sentencing Commission to make a determination, that by regulation, implementation of this new policy could be delayed for a period of time until such time as funding was readily available to support it appropriately?
Mr. Chair, we would not by reg. It would be a situation if you wanted to put that in the statute that it would not start for a period of time. That would be, otherwise we would be required to start that program at July 1 or whenever the legislature would indicate in the bill.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Committee, other questions? I see none. Thank you, Dr. Little. Appreciate your testimony today. Committee, I mentioned the other written neutral testimony that we have before us. Anyone else wishing to testify neutral on the bill? I don't see any. I have no opponent testimony listed. Are there any opponents that wish to testify? I see none. We will close the hearing on House Bill 2026. Committee, you received notice that the previously scheduled meeting for tomorrow was canceled. It's expected that we will have a prolonged period potentially of debate tomorrow on the floor. We do not meet on Friday. No meeting Thursday or Friday, and our next meeting will be Monday. The agenda for next week has been published. I would just say up front that the schedule for Thursday indicates that no bills are scheduled. I can assure you we will meet Thursday, and I can assure you we will have bills, but we're waiting for some introductions to and bills that have previously been introduced to be assigned to the committee, and we'll have plenty to do next week. So I look forward to next Monday when we might, those of us who choose to occupy room in the Capitol for these hearings, we can do that. And I want to also say thanks for your patience. We know that there have been periodically glitches in the technology. I so much appreciate the efforts of the IT with the legislature and Robin Crumpton and her staff today, quickly resolving the issue that we were facing. I was asked early in the session by a reporter, what are you going to do if you find that the live streaming has been disrupted? And I told him, just as we did today, we will stop and wait until it's fixed. Public ability to participate in this process through hearing and viewing what we're doing is important. And I think it worked out well. We got our work done, and technology started working again. And we thank them for their efforts. If there's nothing else before the committee here today, we will adjourn until Monday's meeting. Thank you.